Yeah, welcome to May Ce-2. And anyone here, I know a couple of you guys are here for the first time, right? I chatted with a couple of you guys, but glad to have you. This event, Charlottesville Entrepreneurs in Espresso, has been going on since 2015. And it's there's a number of organizations that help put it on. I am on the board of CBIC, Charlottesville Business Innovation Council. So that is one of the organizations, along with CIC, which is Community Investment Collaborative, and the SBDC, the Central Virginia Small Business Development Center. And we are sponsored by the Becton Institute at UVA as well. So just some great organizations coming together to help put this on. And we want you to encourage you to continue to get the word out. We do this every single month, the third Tuesday of the month. It's recurring. You can put it recurring on your calendar. And then all those organizations send out newsletters, hopefully, that remind of it and whatnot. But so wanted to thank those organizations. And how this event is set up is that we have two speakers. We have an early stage company first, so someone that shares about their early stage business, and then they have an ask for the audience. And then you all will be able to participate in helping them navigate that question or issue or situation that they have for their growth. And then after that, we have a more seasoned entrepreneur that will share their crash and learn stories. So just get to hear the water cooler stories that you may not typically hear from them on their entrepreneurial journey. And I just love it because it doesn't really matter your background. I find that success principles universal and elements of entrepreneurship are as well. And so you can take away something to help you grow is what I found. And then we have announcements after that where you can share if your company is hiring or upcoming events. And then we have breakout rooms at the end. And I'll say all that again later, but that's designed to simulate the in-person environment. So for those of you guys that didn't know, this used to be an in-person event up until COVID. And we were at the iLab at UVA, and we will be going back to in-person as soon as it makes sense for us to do that. And so that's what we were chatting about a little bit ago, is when and how we can go about doing that. So just keep your eyes peeled. All those organizations, by the way, if you sign up for their respective newsletters, you should get reminders about this event. But we would love to have you keep coming if you enjoy it today, which I'm sure you will. But we will start out with introducing our first speaker, and then it might make sense. I think you guys are already on mute, but you can be on mute. I encourage cameras on, but of course not required. I know it's early in the morning and you probably have your cameras on all day, but just unmute to talk. There'll be opportunities to speak up for sure. But I wanted to start with introducing our early stage speakers. So I wanted to introduce Daniel James, or DJ, as he prefers to be called, I believe, and a little bit about him. Pretty fascinating guy from what I've heard from our conversations, but he will probably share a little bit more of this. But I asked him where he grew up, and he's like, he really can't answer that because he has been, and he started moving around since he was 8 months old and has been in all 49 states, and there's not really any one place that he can call home. But I think that's really relevant to what his business is and what he's been able to do. But he grew up in a farming family, a history of farming, and a personal interest in investment and entrepreneurship. And that was, he's ran an incubator, co-working space for social entrepreneurs in Portland, and has taken part in facilitating startup weekends and across the country, multiple. And also he's a graduate of the CIC program, which I mentioned as one of our hosts, which is awesome. And so his company, Herd Ventures, I'll just tee it up to let him really share about the company. But what's kind of fun about today is both of our speakers are in the food space, in the food industry. So I think that was an unplanned coincidence. And so I thought that was awesome. So anyways, I'll go ahead and tee up DJ. You may have the floor.
Thank you, everybody, by the way, and for having me. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I can kind of just dive right into. Herd Ventures is a mission-driven visual storytelling company, and we help those investing in cultivating community through food. A lot of those ways are really just helping develop brand story, creating the actual content, video production, photography, and then also content management. And the reason behind a lot of this was that, yeah, I've traveled my entire life growing up, realizing that small farms were dying out, and there was a distancing between people and food. And I wanted to find out how to cultivate that community. And 50-cent word wise, I called it culinary cultural anthropology, telling stories about the history of food, but on an easier, digestible level. It was really about a lot of the businesses that I would deal with. Good food wouldn't sell itself, but a clear and honest story would. And so essentially I went from, yeah, traveling the country, used to incubate farms all over the place for about the past 10 years. I would do that. And then I got kind of known as being Kerouac in a Steinbeck novel, which was a fun phrase. And then the tenets of my brand really revolved around like dirty boots and a very well-worn leather jacket. And so what I did is I started working with a lot of companies. Farmers were not my end market because they don't have a marketing budget. But I would start working with a lot of the food aggregators in different groups. And I was brought out to Charlottesville after starting a $2 million cannabis farm out in Oregon and building it up, and then leaving and driving cross country in a decommissioned cop car from Folsom Prison, which I then came out to Charlottesville because instead of doing these narratives around on a national level, I realized, you have to really focus on regional food systems in telling these stories and getting a connection between people and place. And Charlottesville is one of the most interesting areas. I've always called it the brackish water, where you have essentially a lot of young progressives coming and playing traditional, but more importantly, it is the screened in back porch of the North. It's an area where people are moving out into, and it's very close to DC. So I've worked on projects trying to connect a lot of the food aggregators. And the past 3 years I've been in Charlottesville doing that, whether it's the local food hub or any of the nonprofits in the area or any that are investing in financing our food shed. That's what I've been working towards. And a lot of the smaller businesses have grown to larger businesses, and I'm a solopreneur and obviously a serial entrepreneur. And that's where a lot of the, or at least the issues and the ask that I have now is, as the business develops, it's a talent acquisition question. And, as a single person doing all of this, I realize the success rate of individual entrepreneurship or businesses with one entrepreneur. And aside from, trying to work with people and staring them up and down for a while and being like, I don't know, maybe I'll work with them more, maybe I want them in, it's really hard. And I think that finding a business partner, let alone, whether or not it's a business partner or your first hire, a business partner is harder than finding a life partner or finding, especially a travel partner. But those are the kind of the pain points that I'm coming across right now, is how to grow and scale. And during COVID, things really picked up. I was doing virtual farm tours and other programs where, food access is food education. And so how do we bring that about? Got involved at the ex-farmers market and other areas in the community, but really looking to kind of scale and grow those things. And currently working on two main projects. One is a docu-series that highlights 6 episodes around what we want to be proud of in Virginia, what food items, and kind of the terroir outside of just wine, right? What is special about, the pigs that are grown here or raised here, or what is special about these different food items, and especially the people, and what they're, not only they're sourcing stories of where they get these ingredients, but they're sourcing stories of where the ideas come from, where these recipes come from, where these culinary artists kind of get their ideas, and kind of defining that for not only Virginia, but the region. But I have that docu-series going, and then I also moved out onto a farm called Astuteville. And so I'm helping revitalize, some of these older farms into how they diversify their portfolio, how these small farms are their modern businesses and how they adapt and evolve. So it kind of, started off on the storytelling, and then it's really merged into how do you take these stories, but not only develop out, say, the agritourism, but the vicarious experience, and then the actual experience to help bridge that gap. But yeah, that's a little bit about what I do.
Awesome. Thank you, DJ. So your question for the audience is, around scaling and finding a partner, and should you find a partner or should you find an employee or build a team? Is
Right.
that ultimately the question? Like, what direction should you go? What are kind of the pros and cons of both, and how do you go about finding that?
Yeah, and in those earlier stages too, you have the high fluctuation, right? Like earlier, beginning of COVID, everything dropped off, and I think for a lot of people it did. And then mid-COVID, I was too busy to where I was hiring out other editors, and it just and then at the beginning of this year, it just dropped off again, and now it's so with that high fluctuation, it's always terrifying. Like, can I hire somebody right now? And can I sustain this level of growth? But yeah.
Yeah. So insights to help him kind of navigate that future season. Anyone already been there? Have some thoughts?
Daniel, this is Don Dunham. How are you?
Good. Hi, Don.
I guess I need to, in hearing your story, I understand it, but I guess I'm trying to understand, how does the business model work? Are you a nonprofit, or are you actually trying to generate income? Because I think that also affects the answer to your question.
Yeah, it is a for-profit, and I used to help social entrepreneurs, but I do believe that you can do good and still generate revenue. And a lot of the business model is around, I have 2 different sets of packages. And so what I try to do is have sustained working relationships where it's kind of subscription model, where different companies, we're being able to outsource, but we can be able to provide photo shoots, continuous fresh content, whether that is in video form, photography, or what I call video vignettes.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel, I am definitely not the person to talk about like starting a company, because I just started mine, which is a storytelling company. So that's kind of interesting. But I thought of 2 different organizations that you really might want to check out. And one of them in particular might be a potential client for you. And it's called the Luma Project. And have you heard of the Luma Project down in Durham?
Mm-hmm.
Just because, for those of you who don't know, that they are doing direct to consumer videos, very, very much like, here's the farmer that grew the peanuts and here's his story, and it's right at the point of sale. So if you go to buy peanuts or wine or whatever, you can push an iPad and hear the farmer's story. So I just wonder if they would be a possible client. And then there's also a magazine that's digital called The Local Palette, that's out of Charleston, South Carolina. And it's all about regional food and recipes and things like that. And so you may want to just check them out too.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So,
yeah, Daniel, what do you need? How do you envision what a partner will do for you, or a hire will do for you? What is it you need to expand? How do you see that working? How do you think that's going to add value or revenue generation for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of it has to do with generating revenue through pre-existing channels. So for instance, residual incomes that are coming in from, I have galleries and galleries of art and film and different content that can be sold and utilized, which I'm terrible at. But it is finding somebody that's good at the things that I'm bad at, which obviously fairly creative sometimes. And then the harder parts really come in where, I've been the accountant, the pauper, pirate, prince, pawn, king, whatever you want to call it, the whole hat rack that we all are familiar with. But a lot of, for me, is in sales acquisition is one of the biggest things. I am really great at talking with clients, but because I empathize with everyone's story so much, I also have an inevitability to want to help them, and help them by saying like, well, just tell me what your budget is.
Right.
And so I continuously, have come across that barrier in a sense where, just I think it's empathizing too much, and that's not great for a business model. But the other thing too is that I very much do care about telling other people's stories, so much that I immerse in it. I always allude to it as like what actors do with what do you call it?
Method acting.
But I call it method business. Like I immerse myself when I do a shoot on a turkey farm. I go there a week before and help them slaughter 500 turkeys and like understand what it is to be doing that job. And then I can, tell that story.
Right.
But I do a terrible job of telling my own story usually, at least in terms of marketing that, which for the longest time I thought, hey, I have these skill sets. I've got this cool technology. That's what people want. And then realizing, people want to work with an individual in general too. So kind of helping in terms of that sales acquisition, and then also helping me to kind of promote a lot of the narratives that I kind of talk about, and realizing that I'm a subject matter expert in my own field now.
Right. So it sounds like you're creative and you need somebody on the business side to help you on the business side.
Oh yeah.
So that's the kind of partner you're seeking, right? Not necessarily another, I mean, it would be nice down the road, but right now it's not another creative partner. It's really a business.
Right. Creative partners can kind of come and go in a sense too of another editor. And I'm working on this docuseries. I have a script writer in New York and other folks that I'm working with, but I find that the other creatives, I'll talk to them about like, hey, are you using QuickBooks? Are you using this? Have you got an accountant? Have you got, a bail, bank, accountant, insurance, lawyer? And they're sitting there going, oh no, but can you tell me about it? And it's like,
right. So what you might think about, especially at this stage, is not necessarily having to bring on a partner, but parsing that out to outsourcing those functions. Certainly the business side of managing your business, you can do that fairly easily. Business development, you can even do that to some extent. And certainly the marketing and telling your story, you can. So you might think about, kind of contracting those out, at least in the beginning. And just figuring out a budget of what you want to pay for that and doing that. You can be pretty effective. And certainly our economy has gone that way, where you have a lot of really talented people who take over those functions for you.
And then you don't, if it's not working out, you're not divorcing like a partner.
Yeah.
If it's not working out, you can find another source. And it might be more cost effective to do that than whatever percentage to a partner too.
Right. And it's funny nowadays too, I keep seeing these ads and other things too for like, you can hire, what do they call it? Like a digital assistant in Costa Rica or something,
Right.
like, and it's like all over the place. And I'm sitting there going like, wow, I got to stay on brand, all about kind of sourcing regionally, let alone if you can locally, but
Yeah, but then you can write off a trip to Costa Rica. So that's not a bad idea.
Yeah. So it's kind of that's where the grand debate is right now. And then same thing, I'm very much a firm believer in friends don't ask friends to drive green tractors, but you don't also ask people for unpaid internships and bringing people on in that kind of capacity. And as a creative, I fully understand it because I work with a lot of nonprofits that seem to think that means I'm a nonprofit as well, and I'm not. So it kind of feeds over that way.
Very good. Yeah. So I think that's the first thing you need to do is just be very clear on like a job description. In other words, what positions do you need what functions do you need to fill? Forget at the moment who is going to do that and whether you're going to hire on a partner, so to speak, and just see if you can get those things done.
Yeah. Well, and I was curious too if anyone had any experience about, because when you do, I've talked to a lot of people over the years, and I've always seen it to be this interesting crux in a business's development where, hey, I've found somebody else this is really great, and it is kind of like a marriage in a sense where you're really debating, all right, how much equity, what is that value, and you can define those roles. But I've always found that to be one of the most interesting point where like everyone's all about a project or an idea until then it's the equity conversation or how to encourage.
Well, that's the other thing about subcontracting. You don't have to worry about equity.
Right. But I'm very interested also in in finding a team in a sense too that they are as invested as I am, which is very hard to match.
I think things like that also take like a tremendous amount of time. My business partner, I have two business partners. One is my husband, and the other one is our business partner Will, who started out as a food runner and then ended up becoming our general manager. And we worked with him for years, knowing how invested he was, how talented he was, and that we can trust him. It's a really hard thing to find a business. I would hesitate to kind of partner with somebody before you really know how they work, really know how to work well with them. And I think, as Craig was saying, like being able to outsource a lot of like the things that you'd rather not take care of, like accounting. I'm a firm believer that no business owner should be doing their own accounting, and leave that to the experts. And to get that off your plate, let you focus on things that are more towards growing your business. As Craig said too, I think like there's so many creative freelancers out there that you could form relationships with. Especially right now, there's just so many people who just are hungry for, especially creatives who are hungry for work. But I think that when we were starting our business, and I was reading up a lot about being a successful restaurant owner, one of the things that kept coming up was to be a successful restaurant owner, you can't be in the kitchen all the time, and you really have to focus on other areas of your business. So you're not going to be as involved in execution, and the more you're able to move yourself away from execution and be less of the creative and more of the creative director, and the easier it will be to grow your business. So hiring freelancers to kind of do some of that more executional work might be advantageous for you to be able to grow other parts of your business. But but other things that are not going, like accounting, is not going to be something that you should really be doing yourself. It's a lot. It takes up a lot. It will take up a lot of your time. Yeah. So
yeah, no, it's a lot of fun, and I tried even doing it too before COVID. I was doing these dinners that I was trying to just find people in the community. So I'd have like a young farmer, a young restaurant owner, a food aggregator, and a food advocate, and I would cook a dinner. And I ended up filming it and actually screening something about it over at the Vinegar Hill. But I've tried everything, and I get very, think outside the box. I've even used Bumble to try to like find other people that just were in the food system, worked around that too, but like these different avenues. And it's very tough to find folks that are as interested, and then they have their job or whatever it is for the time being, and it's finding those roles, those in-betweens, to say, hey, come over and we'll work on this little side project. But trying to figure out, and same thing, like I said, it's been incredibly difficult. I think I've been on that hunt for like 5 years for a good business partner. So any ideas too about kind of where you go looking, and if it is working with somebody part-time just for a small amount. I did that last year, and for a few of those folks, I feel like I've just been kind of sifting through them. But yeah, maybe it's just a patience thing.
Hey Daniel, can I make a comment?
Yeah.
I wanted to my dad owns a upholstery shop, and he has a similar issue where he's something of a creative. He can he can make your car look however you want it to look. But long story short, my mom's a teacher. She can't always be at the books. She can't always be marketing. And the suggestion that I made to them was, why not find like a recent MBA grad, give them a 1099 contract, and make them your business development person. They can take care of some of those other administrative components, and you can give them a contract that would pay out when they actually bring business to the table. But of course, that's a specific type of person, because you're not going to be necessarily paying them up front. They're going to have to be somewhat comfortable in their situation to be able to not be working from a position of lack to build your business or help you build your business. But it might be a way to kind of vest that person's interest and pay them as they go and as they grow, as opposed to trying to give them the money up front and hopefully they produce,
Yeah, no, that's a really good point.
And kind of,
I need the coffee shop to open again so I can go find those MBA students, because I know they're working.
kind of piggybacking off of what both Jason and Kofi said is the business partner, I believe, will show themselves at the appropriate time once you get to know them. So maybe, like Jason said, they're working with you, you're seeing their work, and they kind of identify themselves as a good potential partner, and maybe taking your focus out of finding a business partner unless somebody just obviously comes across your path to be one. That's like, they say, like, when you stop looking for your partner, you find them. It is like dating. I mean, it really is in so many ways. But and then there are ways to incentivize people that you pay to have a vested interest. And there are a lot of people that are driven by that. They're driven by watching something grow and knowing that they're playing a part in that. So you can build things like that. If somebody is a W-2, you can build interest, whether it's, developing equity or something like that, but maybe not that, but you can build interest into whatever comp plan you establish, so that somebody, and then you find somebody that has the heart that you have for the type of work as well. But you can incentivize those things financially.
Yeah, that's right. And that's kind of where things are at. It's scaled from, working with some of these smaller groups and regional nonprofits in a sense, and now looking at, USDA and these larger contracts and projects, but still at the same time, working with like a local bakery and working with local companies, that same thing, just how to scale that. But very much realizing, when you pour from an empty cup, you eliminate a lot of your creativity and a lot of the things that kind of help you sustain. And that's what I'm very big on, promoting ecological sustainability, but you need the financial sustainability to get there, and definitely the mental, which that's why I love groups like this, because I always call these things kind of like Entrepreneurs Anonymous. Like, it's a really great therapy session on top of everything else. Like, good, there are other people going through some of these same things, so it's nice to relate to that.
Yeah. Well, maybe if there's one more person that has a comment for him, but also DJ, you can throw your contact information in the chat.
Sure.
And he'll be in the breakout room at 9:30 or 9:35 or whatever as well. So you can, if you think of other things for him, you can go meet him over in his breakout room. Does anybody else have anything?
I hope.
Okay.
This is David.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to throw in earlier, but you guys were just rocking and rolling, and I love listening. One thing I would consider when it came to partnership versus subcontracts versus managing your bail is considering, hiring a business manager so you can focus on the marketing that you're so good at. I really liked your point earlier, by the way, that it's not about your technology, it's about the story, right? Everybody's favorite radio station is WII FM. What's in it for me, right? And it's the story that's going to drive their business. And so that was a really good point. But what I was thinking is, if you were to find a productive and capable business manager who can manage those subcontracts, whether you're considering a banking, accounting, insurance, legal, those relationships as subcontractors, or like you were saying, bringing in an editor or a writer or somebody on a specific project, in other words, take that off your plate so that you could focus on what you're best at. Ideally, that's what you would be looking for in a partner anyway, but everybody has brought up a really good point. I mean, partnerships are like marriages, and they're even more cumbersome to get out of if you have to. It'll absolutely destroy the business. So you'd want to be really reluctant. And like Hope said, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. In other words, the partner will show up at the right time, and you will know that this is the person that I really want to invest with. I really want to be a part of. Anyway, that was just my 2 cents that I wanted to throw in.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. And it is funny too, with all this outsourcing and everything too, and it always alludes over to marriage, and it feels like even with marriages now, there's so many open marriages and so many other forms of marriage that now with business relationships, it feels like it's emulating the same thing. Everyone wants to kind of be capricious, kind of get a foot in the door, but not fully stay with one company. And so trying to find that right match, I feel like I keep thinking, maybe I interview somebody, otherwise maybe I take them on a road trip and see if we get along with rolling the windows down to the same type of music. And that means they'll be a great partner. But yeah, there's so many litmus tests to be able to succeed in that area. But yeah, thank you everybody for the feedback and advice. I really do appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you very much, CJ. All right, so let's transition to our Crash and Learn. I am excited to present Jason Becton, and a little bit about his background before we hear from him is that he grew up in New Jersey and has always had a love for cooking, but maybe didn't know that there was a career path for that made sense. So he, after college, while he did spend a semester in Paris and was inspired there, he became an art director in the advertising industry. So that was his practical path. He did that for about 9 years until he got tired of the corporate world. And so he left that for culinary school, and he went to the French Culinary Institute, which I believe is in New York. And then worked as kind of made his way up at the Four Seasons Hotel in New York, to eventually be a restaurant chef there. And then moved to Charlottesville eventually with his husband for a quieter life. And I believe your husband's from the area, and started MarieBette. It had 2 daughters as well, and started MarieBette in 2014, and the Petite MarieBette in 2019, which note is right before the pandemic. Fun fact, MarieBette is named after his 2 daughters, Marion and Betty. And so really excited to hear about his journey as an entrepreneur. So I will give you the floor, Jason. And then we will, if you have questions, we're going to give you the opportunity for Q&A after he's done.
Thanks y'all for having me. It's it makes me feel really so happy to think that people actually want to listen to my story and want to know anything about what's going on with me. If that introduction seemed kind of meandering, I can show you how even more meandering my career path has been than what Hope had mentioned. When I was in high school, I wanted to be a herpetologist, which is a scientist, a zoologist who studies reptiles and amphibians. And then when I got to college, I was pre-med, and I was pre-med up until my junior year, when I went and did a semester abroad in Paris. And then I decided that I was not interested in going to med school and, being in school until I was old and in my late 20s. I decided that I really wanted to figure out how to get back to Paris in some way. And I decided to go into advertising, which was kind of a surprise, I think, for my mother and for other people who knew me. But I enjoyed I thought that I would really enjoy the creative side of working in an advertising agency. So I got a job at Ogilvy in New York City. Started out as an account manager, and which is kind of like being a waiter, where you get credit for nothing but get blamed for everything. And I was in that position for about a year and a half, and then I learned I really didn't like it, and I ended up learning graphic design programs and being able to switch over to the creative department. And I was an art director for the remainder of time that I spent in advertising. Advertising is kind of, I think it's glamorized a lot in media. But for me, I just found I couldn't find a place that felt right for me. I was one of 3 Black creatives four Black creatives in the department, about 100 people, and was often relegated to diversity work, and I think that for me it was not that work isn't important, but it did feel kind of like a limited experience, and I felt like me and the other Black creatives in the department were often overlooked, and it took. I mean, it's kind of that story I think everyone's heard, that you have to kind of work twice as hard to get half the credit. And I just found myself being really frustrated with the whole corporate experience. And I had a conversation with this friend of mine who's also Black, who was in a different department. She was in the art buying department, and just kind of frustrated with our experiences and trying to move up the corporate ladder, and how difficult it was, and how to see people who your peers who may have not been as talented or worked as hard as you to get opportunities that you weren't getting. And again, I don't think that it was like an active kind of thing, but more of a passive kind of like, oh, I just don't feel seen. But anyway, we were talking about kind of complaining about what our experiences were, and we just talked about entrepreneurship. We were like, the best way for us to feel like we are in control of our own lives and careers would be to be in business for ourselves. And it was really transformative conversation for me, because I don't think it was something that I ever thought that I would ever do. My mom was a nurse, and for most of my life was a single mom. I didn't have anybody in my family who owned a business. I had no idea how to start a business plan. Seemed like this mystery. And but I that day kind of figured out like thought about what would I do? What would entrepreneurship look like for me? And I didn't want to start an advertising agency. I didn't feel like I had passion for it. But I did love to entertain, and my time in France, even though it wasn't for culinary, it was for sociology and art history. Um, uh, it really did inspire me to appreciate um, food and the culture around it a lot more. Um, so anyway, I love to entertain. I had friends who worked for Martha Stewart who I would cook for, and they just were like, "Oh, you're just such a great cook, and you should go into that." um, and like anybody else who's never had a restaurant before, I just thought it'd be fun and easy, and you could just have your friends come to your restaurant, and you can just hang out. And I did work in restaurants in college as a server throughout college, actually. So I set that day to like figure out how to get there. Um, and advertising was kind of it's always going through a little bit of a tumultuous time. Clients fire fire agencies all the time, and then there's huge rounds of layoffs. And um, around this time, Ogilvy was having like probably every 3 months, like a round of layoffs. And at one point, I was pretty convinced that I was going to be on the chopping block. My immediate supervisor had transferred to another office, and I wasn't very busy, and I didn't really have a whole lot of attention from the group creative director. So I was pretty convinced I was going to get laid off, and I was like, if this happens, what do I do? And my thought was, I'm just going to go to culinary school. I'm going to go to culinary school. I'm going to quit this job, or I'm going to quit advertising and go to culinary school. And I actually didn't get laid off, but I got moved to another department or another part of the business, and I kind of just took it as a sign, and I found another advertising job that was it paid more, but it was kind of a dead end kind of job, but it also was offered me flexibility to go to culinary school part time. So I did that. Went to culinary school, worked this other job at McCann Erickson, which is another like big corporate agency. I was working on Verizon Wireless, and I worked my way through culinary school. And uh, when I finished, I took the leap and quit my advertising job and took a giant pay cut to go and be a prep cook at the Four Seasons Hotel. And I chose the Four Seasons because it has a great reputation. There's a lot of uh, many different kitchens, lots of opportunities to learn, and also it had health insurance. And I met my husband in culinary school, actually my last day of culinary school, and he started working for small private restaurants. His first job was at Blue Hill in New York, and then he followed the chef de cuisine at Blue Hill to a new restaurant called 81 that no longer exists. But he worked there for a few years, for a couple of years, and then he decided that he didn't really love line work, and that he wanted to kind of learn more about baking. So he started working for Amy's Bread and made baguettes all day long at Amy's Bread. And then we adopted our first daughter, and life started getting more complicated and difficult. And at that moment, he decided that it would be a good idea to take on a position as the head baker at a small startup bakery in Hoboken called Chocopan. And in the beginning, I was like, "Why are you doing this? Like, we have a newborn baby," but he did it, and it was really hard. And but he learned about starting up a business, and he helped this woman who started the business, who was an amazing businesswoman but didn't have any culinary experience really. He helped her open up a second location, so he had experience opening up two businesses. And my experience basically was I worked my way up from prep cook at the Four Seasons to one of the restaurant chefs, and worked in banquets, worked in the bar kitchen, worked in the lounge kitchen, worked in the main restaurant, worked in the Michelin starred restaurant for a while, and learned how to manage a team. Again, because I managed a team in advertising as well, but I've managed a team at a union hotel, which is especially tricky, and I had a good relationship with the HR department, and learned a lot from them about how to manage. And when we felt that we were ready, we had our second daughter, and we felt that we were ready to move. We quit our jobs, sold our house, and moved down to Virginia. We decided on Charlottesville because Patrick's from here originally, and we used the capital from the sale of our house, or we used the profits from the sale of our house as capital to start the business. And it was really scary, but we felt like we had done, we'd put in the work to start the business and tried to do as much as we could to learn how to do it. Quick side story, in the middle of, when we first started working in the culinary world, my husband had an acquaintance who came from money, and he started out as a teacher, and then his parents financed him to start a restaurant. He had no restaurant experience, but he wanted to start a restaurant. And we had a conversation with him, and he was like, "Well, I heard you guys want to start a restaurant. Why don't you just do it?" And we're like, "Well, we don't feel like we're ready yet." And like, he's like, "Nah, I just have to just do it. There's no time like the present. You guys have you know how to cook, you have some business experience, just do it." And boy, that's an easy thing to say if you have like all the money in the world to fail and then start up again. But we knew that we were in that position. We knew that we had like one shot, and we really wanted to put the work in and the preparation to make sure that one shot wasn't going to fail. So anyway, we moved down here. We found a space, and we had a business plan. My experience in marketing and design was extremely useful to avoid a lot of those costs, designing a logo and branding and all that stuff. And I have to be honest and say that I did not let too many people know that too many of my friends know that we were starting this business, because I didn't really believe that it was actually going to happen until our first sale. But it took, I guess we started build out in August, and then we opened on December 4th, 2014. and it's been like a real wild ride since. In terms of like crash and burn stories, I would say like it was the first 3 months of opening the business was kind of felt like kind of a crash and burn. Preparation I found is super key. Making sure that you have all those things in place before you actually open your doors. Having a business plan that makes you think about all aspects of your business and what can go wrong, what you need to prepare for, how you'll handle accounting, or marketing, or your POS system, your website, all those different things. Making sure that all those things were in place before we opened. What we tried to do as much of that as possible, but realizing or finding out that when you open your doors, you're not going to have time to do all of that preparation anymore. You are now just focused on keeping the business afloat. And anything that wasn't done before we opened was hard to do in terms of outside of the day-to-day, because we just had no time. We were working 14, 16-hour days. Thankfully, we had help from Patrick's parents who live down here. We didn't have a day off for 3 months, other than Christmas Day when we were closed, and New Year's Day when we were also closed. After the first week of being open, I called a friend of mine who had a restaurant in New York City for 16 years, and I was like, what have we done? This is awful. Like, I don't want to do more. Couldn't find staff to stay. We were just constantly working, or just couldn't see like how this could ever be different or be better. And she was like, just know that it will get better. After a month, it will feel a little bit more, it'll feel less like hell. And after 3 months, you'll probably think that there's nothing else you'd rather do than own your own business. And that really was the case. After a month, we started getting some staff who stayed. After 3 months, we were finally able to start taking days off, and start to pay ourselves. And after a year, certainly after a year, I couldn't imagine doing anything else than being our own bosses and having our own business. Our successes were our own, our failures were our own. It was fun to be able to problem solve, and also was really cool. I mean, it was cool to see like how well received we were in the community, and how people really enjoyed our concept and what we were doing. And also it was really cool to pull together a team of people who, and kind of make it, I know this sounds really cliche, but kind of make it feel like a family. I think we have a really great staff, and we've had amazing, and restaurant work is transitional work generally, but we've had people stay for a long time, and we've had some people who've stayed with us since we've opened, and that building a team, and keeping that team happy has been a really rewarding experience for me. Employee retention has been like, as I said, has been kind of like an issue, and that's kind of another crash and burn story. As I said in the beginning, it was really difficult to find staff, and then to keep staff has been had been really challenging. And you need that consistency. You need people to stay. You need people to stay long enough to be good at what you need them to do. And there's different ways that we found of keeping staff. One way is which sounds kind of weird, but we do biannual reviews, and it's an opportunity. This is something I learned from working at the Four Seasons. It was the HR department was really awesome, and they really built that into into your career that you expected to have these reviews. And it was an opportunity to give people positive feedback and to acknowledge all the good work that they're doing, but also a formal opportunity to give them criticism or critiques of what they're doing. And I think that in general, we've never had anybody who has been surprised of anything we say in these reviews, but it is a really good time to kind of reset. We also do quarterly staff meetings. And we haven't done them in a year with COVID, but it's a really important part of our business. And we pay them well. We pay them as best as we can, and also share in our successes. This past year, we had a grant from Discover Card for Black business owners. We were awarded a grant of $25,000, and we gave most of that grant away back to our employees. We used some of it on an espresso machine, but we gave most of it away to our employees. Because this pandemic has been really difficult for them. All of our employees who we have in our Rose Hill shop have been with us the whole time. We haven't hired any new staff in the kitchen or in the front of the house. And I would say they've all been with us for at least 2.5 years. And it's been challenging for them, and it was a good opportunity for us to do right by them and to show them how much we appreciate them. And doing that from time to time, giving bonuses has been, I think, a good way to keep people happy and to let you know that you appreciate them. And then actually, when you have to give them some criticism, it's probably more well received because they know that you do appreciate them. Another, I guess, challenging story was the pressure to expand into a second location. It was something that definitely we felt like there was pressure to do it, but it did feel daunting. And as I mentioned before, we had hired, so my husband's cousin's best friend had moved from California to have a different experience. And at the time he was 24, he had went to school for teaching. He had been a teacher for a while and just really didn't love it, and decided that he didn't really know what he wanted to do, but he had worked in restaurants in college, and he moved to Virginia. And Sam, Patrick's cousin, asked us, "Oh, do you think you can find a spot for Will, my friend Will, in your business?" And at the time, I think we were only open for 2 months, and we were like, "Sure, yeah, sure, if we can find something for him to do." So he was a food runner in the beginning, and pretty quickly we learned that he was more than a food runner. He could be more than a food runner. So we made him our restaurant manager, and then promoted him to general manager. And Will has a really great work ethic. He's really great with employees. Our employees always had a good relationship with him and respected him. And he was constantly asking for more work to do, and more responsibilities to take on. And at a certain point, we felt like there really wasn't much more that we can offer him in terms of being a general manager. And then an opportunity appeared for us to have a second location. A business owner who had a retail store was condensing her store. She had 2 storefronts right next to each other, and then she condensed to 1. And for years, she'd been trying to figure out a way to partner with us in some way, shape, or form for us she thought it would be good for her business if we had some kind of presence in her business, like a coffee a coffee counter that sold pastries in her business. And I never really felt interested in partnering with somebody I didn't know. So I didn't think that that would be a good idea. But this storefront opened up, and she was like, you should check it out. It'd be great if you can have a second location here. It'd be great for us to be bringing business and be right next to us. So Will, Patrick, and I walked over and looked at the location, and we discussed with him the opportunity for him to be a partner in that second location. We had him put together the business plan, and do a lot of the legwork to get it done, and had an operating agreement drafted, and a partnership agreement drafted. And we opened our second location on February 4th of 2019, and he was our business partner. He was the person who was going to run it. The challenge was that the business didn't take off as quickly, or our downtown location didn't take off as quickly as our original location did. So I think that there was this expectation that lightning would strike twice, but it didn't. And growing the downtown location was a lot more difficult than we anticipated. From the beginning, I think that it did well, and it was by our accountant standards, it was breaking even pretty quickly, and then making some profit in a few months. But it certainly wasn't doing gangbusters like I feel like our original location did, pretty early on. So I had a lot of meetings about trying to figure out how to fix that and make it and keep growing the business, and also kind of temper Will's expectations, because I think it was a little disappointing for him in the beginning to feel like, this should be doing better. This should be doing better. I'm putting a lot of work into it. And then the pandemic happened, and that was really scary for everybody, but for us, we put all this time, energy, money, sweat, and tears into these businesses that took a real hit. And our main, from the very beginning, we had made the decision to not close either location. And I know a lot of businesses were like, oh, we're going to take like a month-long hiatus to kind of collect ourselves and figure things out. And I was like, we can't do that. We have to stay open. If we're able to stay open safely, then we need to do that for a lot of different reasons. One, once you're closed, you're out of sight, out of mind. You start to lose mind share, you lose market share, you lose your employees who may or may not come back. And if they don't come back, then you start from scratch with trying to train up new people in a difficult situation. And it feels like you owe it to your employees to stay open and to keep them employed as best you can. So we did that. We stayed open. The downtown location was really difficult to keep open because downtown became like a ghost town. But because we were the only place open, Grit had closed, Mud House had closed, Paradox Pastry had closed, all of our competitors had closed down. So we were the only place to go. So it started changing people's behavior and people's rituals. And that was the best decision that we could have made. We kept the staff that we had, we kept them employed at both locations. The downtown location now is more profitable and has more revenue than it did before the pandemic. And it kept our business that kept our business afloat. So it was really, it was navigating the beginning of the pandemic was extremely stressful. We literally met every night and to come up with a plan of what things we were going to change, what things we were going to do, what menu items were going to go, what menu was going to stay, what kind of items were we still going to keep offering, what were our hours going to be, what online presence were we going to have. Only the next day to have to change again. It was like really exhausting. But in the end, all that hard work we put into being flexible and thinking on our feet paid off, and both locations were able to stay open. Yeah. So anyway, it's been almost 7 years now that our original location was opened, and through it all, I have to say that this was the best decision. Taking the chance on starting this business was one of the best decisions I've made in my life, and it's exactly what I hoped it would be. Our successes are our own successes. Our failures are our own failures, and it's a constant it's constant problem solving, which is never really boring. So
awesome. Thank you so much, Jason, for sharing. That was an incredible story. And I forgot to say this in the beginning, but if those of you guys that have never eaten there, it's amazing. MarieBette's food is lots of head nods. It's amazing. But I would love to open up the floor for Q&A. Do you guys have questions for Jason at all? And you can just unmute and speak up kind of like we did on the last.
I have a question. Jason, so I can relate a little bit. Somehow, through a strange set of circumstances, I became the general manager of a steakhouse in Malibu, California. I was 22 years old. And it was probably one of the foremost or foundational business experiences I ever had. And so I'm wondering, there's something magical and mystical sometimes about the restaurant business. What would you think are transferable lessons to any business that, because it sounds like it wasn't like you've dreamed of doing that your whole life, but yet you found yourself there. And it's one of those things that's, takes a lot of different soft skills. So I'm wondering what you think is the most transferable things to any business.
So I think the basics are all pretty much the same. Employee retention. How do you create a community? And as I said, like my experience working as a manager at the Four Seasons was, and I got to say, their HR department is like first class. So all of like the training programs that they would put together, the importance of staff meetings, the importance of reviews, that really, really is just so much more important. I think that a lot of businesses feel like, I don't need to do that. I don't need to, I can give like informal feedback. I can train on, I can train our employees on a daily basis that's not necessarily formal. But there's something, putting those systems in place, having an employee handbook, really thinking about your HR management aspect of your business, and putting the time and effort into it, it just really is so valuable. I think that we do a really good job of keeping people happy and creating a culture of accountability between employees too. Like most of our employees feel really comfortable like calling each other out in a way that is respectful of keeping up the standards. But having those kind of formal systems in place, formal training programs, formal reviews, and formal staff meetings where you have an opportunity to really allow people to be social and have fun with each other, but to give a general message of things that need to be improved upon, not in the individual sense, but like in a group sense. I think my background in branding has served us really well. Any good business needs to have a strong brand, and we really thought this through before we opened what the name was going to be, to keep it, as Hope had mentioned, like the business named after our daughters, Marion and Betty, and you know, it is like an homage to them, certainly. It's intentional. We really love our daughters, and like, and they're a really important part of our life. So it makes sense that we would, for that to have that connection. But it's a pretty, you know, it's intentional. It's kind of, it gives people a sense that this is a family-run business, and Charlottesville loves supporting local and loves supporting family-owned businesses, small businesses. So I think that having that personal connection really works in this market, and then just kind of keeping things on brand all the time. About I think we have our advertising and our marketing has a certain look to it. We are also, you know, we're a Black and gay owned business, and we have made the decision not to shy away from that identity, and we lean into it. And I think that gives a certain level of authenticity to what we're doing. So one of the things that we do is for Black History Month and for Pride Month in June, we have this thing that we started that's gained a lot of popularity, where every day in February we highlight a Black American in past or present who's contributed to American culture and society, and it could be somebody you know, who everybody knows, like Beyonce, or somebody who not a whole lot of more people should know, like Ida B. Wells. So we're going through taking people who are more popular and who are more obscure, and giving them a little bit of giving them their kind of day in the, you know, for people to learn about them. And the same thing for Pride Month. Every day we put a different LGBTQ person on the bread, and put it on social media and talk about their story. And I think that really paying attention to, and I think that's on brand for us. I think that has that personal touch, brings it back to who we are, and is a creative way to do that. So I think that focusing on your brand and protecting your brand is something that like is not just for our restaurants. I think it's for any business. Yeah,
those are great answers. I appreciate that. I don't want you to have to stretch to answer my question, but the theme I'm hearing though is that you've institutionalized, or it's just part of your fabric, the value of people. Like you're valuing people, the formal things you have in there for the purpose of developing, helping people develop, and then you're recognizing individuals and stuff like that. It's very interesting. That seems to be kind of the feel and the vibe I'm hearing.
Look, I mean, I feel like there's something to be, you know, I have an employee who has been working for us since she was 17. She went to UVA. She's worked for us throughout, you know, her end of high school and then throughout college. And she doesn't know what she wants to do. and there's some sense from people in, or in her circle that like, what are you doing still working for this restaurant? Like, but there's value
Mhm.
in in any job that you have, and it's really about finding um, some skills that you can apply to other things. Like, she has become one of our supervisors, and so now she has management experience, and it's real management experience. It's not, she's training people. Um, she's learning about business. She's learning about customer service. She's learning about human resource issues. Like, it's a real experience that a lot of people who are her peers may not be learning. Um, I I worked in advertising for 9 years. It's not where I ended up, but I certainly did gain a lot of skills in doing that. And I tell a lot of young people this: it's like, you may not find exactly what it is that you want to do immediately, but every experience that you have is an opportunity to learn, and you can take so many different things from a job that or from a career that you didn't really love. You can take a lot of those experiences and skills and move them to whatever next career you want to move forward with. Management is management, no matter what. People management and business management is pretty much the same, I think, going from one industry to the next. So I feel like my experiences working in restaurants in high school, and not high school, in college, really taught me a lot.
Mhm.
Watching how different restaurant owners manage their businesses and paying attention to that, uh, and seeing what worked for them and what didn't, is really valuable.
Yeah, it's a business where the impact of that kind of mindset is very immediate. It will show up very quickly and have an impact. It's interesting. Well, thank you. I think it's fantastic.
Who else has a question for Jason?
I have a question. I'm kind of curious, when you were first starting with your husband, there was just the two of you. Did you set like very clear division of, I have this experience of branding, so I'm owning this, you're owning that? Or was it really every day coming to the table, what needs to be done, divide and conquer? How did you structure that?
So that's an excellent question, because a lot of before we opened up this business and we talked about it with friends who were older than us, who were married and had businesses together, they were like, "Don't do it. Just don't start a business with your partner," which was kind of always ironic to me, because these people had businesses with their spouses for decades, and it was like, it's working for you, so why would you discourage us from doing that? Patrick and I, we before we opened up this business, we did some catering jobs together and quickly learned what worked and what didn't. One thing that didn't work for sure was working on the same project together. And that continues to be the same mistake. Even like at home, like when we make dinner, we don't make dinner together. That's like a fairy tale that's like a good thing to do, I think. Um, I think that we, in the catering jobs, one of the first that we did, I remember we were making he was making mashed potatoes. And I was like, "Why did you put the salt in the water before?" And he was like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Just season it afterwards." And he's like, "Doesn't matter." I was like, "Yeah, but you have better control when you can season it afterwards rather than put the salt in the water. You don't know how it's." And it became like he got mad at me. I mean, I would get mad at me, and it kind of ruined the evening. And that happened like the next catering thing. We had another kind of thing where we kind of got in each other's way, and it was just like, leave me alone. I know what I'm doing. Just trust me that like it's going to come out the way that it's supposed to be. And we had a discussion about that. And we were like, we can't do this to each other anymore. Like, we have to trust each other and know that we're going to do the right thing, and that, and ask for help when we need it, but don't offer it we don't ask. So when we were discussing what kind of business we would have together, MarieBette seemed like the perfect business for us to work together but not work together. There's our business model is unique to Charlottesville, but it's not a unique business model. There's a place, Maison Kaiser in New York City and in DC, it has a very similar business model. And then there's another one that I'm blanking on the name, Le Pain Quotidien, LPQ. So there's a bunch of those in New York City and in Boston and DC. They do a really good job, really high quality, like a bakery in the front, and then kind of a restaurant in the back. So when we were thinking about what will we do together, this seemed like the perfect business model because he can handle all the baked stuff, and I can handle the restaurant and front of the house because I'm more of the extrovert. That's why you don't see him here. I can handle the front of the house and the kitchen, and he can handle the bakery, and we'd have our own worlds, and we would trust each other that we would take care of those different worlds and ask for help if needed. The only argument that we've had about our business, has been when he felt like I pushed too hard for something that we did this thing called the chocolate cherry sourdough, and it didn't sell all that well, but it had a lot of diehard fans. So he decided he wanted to take it off the menu, and every day I would have to listen to people tell me that we really needed to put it back on. They really wanted to see it back. They really loved it, and it's really so disappointing that we don't have it anymore. And when are we going to get it back? I'd listen to this all the time, and I was like, I think we should put it back on. And he didn't really want to do it. And then finally he did, but he changed it. And then I had to listen to people complain about how it wasn't the same. And I was like, you need to just do it the way that was before. And then he got mad at me. He was like, I thought we weren't doing this. We weren't like, this is my decision. This is my creative decision. This is what I want to do. And I was like, okay. So we've really delegated responsibilities and stayed in our own lane. And this business model has helped us to really be able to do that. Even with Will. So Will is our business partner in our second location. We now have 3 different buildings. So there's the Rose Hill shop, there's the commissary that's on Preston, and we have the downtown location. So Will is the master of our downtown location. That's his building. Patrick is the master of the commissary, and then I run the Rose Hill shop. So we all work together, but we work separately, and we trust each other to run things the way that we want, that we think is appropriate, and that's worked really well for us. We ask for help when we need it, for sure, but I couldn't run the commissary. Patrick worked in the dining room for like all of like an hour and a half until I was like, no, go. This is not for you. And I don't know any of the customers in the downtown location. I'm rarely ever there, and it's a really challenge for me to use their POS system. And maybe that's a bad thing, but it really does work for our business, to just give each other the independence.
Awesome. Thank you. That was a great question, Kaylee. We have time for one more question.
Hi, this is Esther. Question about, you talked about being able to maintain your employees, and I was wondering if you have tips on hiring, like how are you able to identify who would be successful and be able to be there long term?
So that's a hard one. As I said, like restaurant work tends to be transitional work. but we have the best employees in general that we've had have been word of mouth from our other employees, right? Doesn't always work out that way, but I would say that that tends to be how we find the most employees. Indeed and Craigslist are also really good, and people who drop in and leave applications, but um, having recommendations from other employees has worked, I think, worked the best. Making sure that you have the right people. So I'll give you a couple of examples. When we probably after a year, we decided that we needed to hire an additional cook. So we had two cooks in the kitchen at every time, but we were starting to feel like business levels were enough where we needed to have a third. And Will was working part-time at the time at another restaurant, and there was a guy he was like, this guy is an amazing cook. He's really fast. He's a little bit of a jerk, but he's really, really good. And I think that he'll work out really well if, for you. And he was right. The guy was a really amazing cook. He was really fast to prep. He was had great presentation, but he was a real jerk. And he brought this kind of macho culture to our kitchen that did not exist. And he was making fun of other employees and just in general, just creating kind of like had a negative energy. But he was really good. Other businesses may have kept him on just because the restaurant that he worked for kept him on for a really long time until there was a harassment issue that kind of was going to be a legal harassment issue. It was more important to me to keep our culture than it was for me to have somebody who was super productive. So after a week and after I think 4 or 5 shifts, I was like, no, this isn't working out. We don't need you to come back. So I would rather sacrifice somebody who was talented if they didn't fit into our culture. I think one of the things that I say over and over again to our employees, and actually when I'm hiring people, is the three things that I'm looking for in people. It's not necessarily experience, because we're willing to train people, is showing up, being willing to learn to do the things that we do things the way that we do them, and being open to that. Because a lot of people will come and be have their own ways that they want to do stuff, and it kind of doesn't always work that way. So we want people to kind of just be open to doing things the way that we do them. And then an ability to get along with people. And I always center those 3 things around the golden rule. And I'm not a religious person, but I think that I try to live my life in that sense of treat other people the way that you want to be treated. And I say that all the time to my employees: treat other people the way you want to be treated. If you're having a bad day and you need a little patience, if somebody else is having a bad day, give them that space and patience. But those 3 things that I say about showing up, learning to do things the way we do them and not pushing back against how we do them, and then getting along with others, they're all based around the golden rule. If somebody doesn't show up, if your coworker doesn't show up, that's going to ruin your day. So don't do it, and make sure that you show up. If you have a way that if you have your own business and you have a way that you want to do things, you want them to do things the way that you want them to be done. So do that for us. Do things the way that we want them to be done. And on a basic level, you want to be treated well. Treat other people well. So we've had some people who haven't. We've had some employees who are not as productive, but they're wonderful people, and people like working with them. So I'll take that. I'll take that over ruining our work culture and having people around who just are negative and who are bringing people down and aren't respectful to people. So I think that it's a long-winded answer to your question, but I feel like the best way that I've learned to kind of find and keep people is to trust them, to trust our employees. If they send somebody to us, that's okay. Well, you like them, you like this person enough to recommend them and put your reputation on the line, then I'm gonna give them a shot and trust them to know that, to see how it works out. And also to kind of listen to them and be like, I know you want to come to work and work with people who respect you and not feel dread out of coming to work. So I'm not going to have anybody here who's going to make you feel that dread. Not our managers, not our supervisors, not your peers. I want everyone to like coming here and to feel like you're valued. So I'm not going to bring somebody in who's going to make you feel like you're not valued. Does that
Awesome.
make sense? Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yes, very
Yeah.
insightful.
Great. Yeah. Great stories. The back of that one too. Experiences, experience based. All right. Well, we are starting to wind down. Thank you very much, both DJ and Jason.